Teen mom was kicked out of her all-white school. 8 years later, she returned with a PhD and a mic. Before we get into the story, drop a comment and tell us, where in the world are you watching from today? St. Alden's Academy stood apart, physically, socially, and in every other way that mattered. Tucked behind wrought iron gates and towering brick walls, surrounded by ancient oaks dripping with Spanish moss, the school didn't just look exclusive, it was. You didn't get in because you were brilliant. You got in because your family name had been on plaques for generations. The place gleamed with a kind of smug perfection. White columns like polished teeth, marble floors that echoed with entitlement, and brass doorknobs that looked like they'd never been touched by sweaty hands. Even the hallway clocks ticked with Swiss precision. And in that machine built for legacy and money, Alicia Monroe was the one glitch. Black, brilliant, broke. She walked those halls with her back straight and her braids neat, like she belonged, even if every whisper and glance suggested otherwise. Not a single missed assignment, not a single tardy. One academic competition after another, all with her name at the top. The teachers spoke her name with something like awe, but there was always a tightness behind it, like they were waiting for her to prove them right and mess it all up. On paper, she was perfect. But perfect wasn't enough. She was there on a scholarship, earned with brain power and relentless work. Her mother, Lorraine Monroe, a nurse with permanently tired eyes and hands that smelled like antiseptic, had filled out 5 different forms, ridden 3 buses to the county office, and made it happen. Alicia studied like it was the only thing keeping her alive, because it kinda was. "She tries too hard," they'd whisper behind her in the cafeteria. "Something's off. She's unnatural. Like she's playing a part." The daughters of judges, lobbyists, insurance moguls, they didn't bully her. That would have been too easy, too obvious. Instead, they froze her out with icy smiles and polite non-invitations. Conversations would stop when she walked by. Compliments came with asterisks. "You're doing amazing, especially considering," and then silence. And no one played that game better than Madeline. Blonde. Perfect diction, like she'd swallowed a drama coach. Smile that never reached her eyes. President of the student council. Queen of the debate team. Social chair of everything that mattered. She never faked kindness. Never even tried. Alicia could feel her gaze like a laser on the back of her neck. That look said, "You think you're one of us? You're not. We're just letting you sit at the table." The day Alicia found out she was pregnant, the sky was a piercing blue. She thought it was a mistake. Maybe the tests were wrong. Maybe her hormones were off. But the nurse at the local clinic said it casually, like reading a weather forecast. Alicia didn't cry. She stared at the floor, unmoving, and thought one thing. How long can I keep this a secret? She couldn't. It didn't take long before the whispers turned into headlines. Her barely there baby bump was noticed, then dissected. 1 week, it was gossip. 2 weeks in, she got called into the principal's office. Mrs. Winthrop sat behind her desk, all pearls and posture, silver hair in a tight bun, glasses that made her look like she'd never blinked. The room smelled like expensive wood polish. Photos of alumni lined the walls. None of them looked like Alicia. "Alicia," the principal began, palms folded neatly on the desk. "St. Alden's holds its students to certain standards. We expect our girls to be examples, on campus and off." Her voice was calm, polite, like reading policy aloud. Not a word about Alicia's record. Nothing about the scholarships, the long nights studying, the competition she won. Just one thing mattered now. She had broken the rules, the unspoken, unwritten ones. "You're not expelling me because I'm pregnant," Alicia said, her voice tight but steady. "You're expelling me because I've always made you uncomfortable." For a moment, Mrs. Winthrop looked down, like something had hit a nerve. Then her eyes lifted again, cool and glassy. "We're sorry." That was it. No questions, No support, no curiosity about what came next. The decision had been made long before the pregnancy. This was just the excuse they were waiting for. Alicia walked out of that building carrying a cardboard box, her notebooks, a few awards, a pen her mother gave her, and a stack of sociology books. The hallway that had once echoed with the sounds of her footsteps was silent now. Only Mr. Harris, the one teacher who used to praise her essays like they were gold, stood at the far end. He turned away, pretended he was busy with files. She didn't stop. She didn't cry. But something inside her broke, quiet and complete, like someone had yanked the cord from the wall and shut off the lights. Outside, the Georgia heat pressed down like a punishment. Asphalt shimmered. She walked to the nearest bus stop and sat, the box at her feet. People passed without looking. One parent she recognized tightened their jaw and picked up the pace. Elite education, honors, scholarships, all gone in a single afternoon. Not because she failed, but because she reminded the system that you could be excellent and still not belong. Her chapter at St. Alden's ended with no applause, no kind words, just heat, silence, and one question ringing in her mind. If even all that wasn't enough to be accepted, what now? The answer didn't come right away, but it would. When Alicia Monroe stepped off the bus and walked back into her neighborhood on Savannah's south side, she wasn't the pride of the block anymore. The whispers didn't wait for her to walk away. Porch windows closed faster when she passed. The old ladies who used to wave didn't lift a hand. Some just stared, and in those stares were 100 things: disappointment, fear, confusion, judgment. Even strangers seemed to know. That's her, that girl. The house hadn't changed. One story, faded paint on the shutters, smelling faintly of humidity, detergent, and burnt coffee. Inside waited Lorraine Monroe, tired but standing, a nurse with permanent calluses who sometimes came home without taking off her shoes. She said nothing, just wrapped Alicia in a fierce hug, the kind that said, "You're still mine," and led her to the kitchen. Fried cabbage, sweet tea, her love language. "Just remember," Lorraine said that night, rain tapping against the windows. "Nobody owes you anything, not even when you've earned it 100 times over." That sentence cut deeper than any lecture. But it also stayed. In Savannah, gossip moved faster than wildfire in a dry field. By the third day after Alicia's return, the senior deacon at Light of Truth Baptist Church gave her a tight nod without a smile. His wife, Mrs. Hudson, the same woman Alicia once sang with in the youth choir, looked right through her like they'd never met. At Sunday service, she could feel the weight of eyes behind her, burning holes through her back. "God forgives, but people take their sweet time," someone whispered after the closing prayer. And that was one of the nicer things said. Among white families, the whispers were less poetic and more pointed. "This is what happens when you hand out scholarships to the wrong kind of people." Some said she was proof the system was broken. Others just saw confirmation of the assumptions they'd always had. Behind closed doors in a meeting with the school board, Mrs. Winthrop, the same poised headmistress who'd pushed her out, reportedly said, "It was only a matter of time. She's not from our world." Finding a job was like trying to catch fog with your hands. In a town where reputation beat resumes and rumors crossed city blocks faster than buses, every interview ended the same way, sometimes with polite lies. "There aren't any openings right now," sometimes with thinly veiled truth. "We're looking for someone with a more stable situation." No one ever said it outright, but they all knew. Her name rang familiar now, but not in the way it used to. A month later, Alicia took a night shift job as a janitor at the city hospital, the same one where her mother worked. 6 days a week, minimum wage, maximum silence. It wasn't a job she chose. It was the job that said yes, and she needed it. Diapers weren't free, labor wasn't cheap, and her mother could only stretch so far. The pregnancy was brutal. Her body, still recovering from the endless demands of elite education, was now carrying life while pushing brooms and scrubbing bathrooms. Some nights, nausea would hit her hard mid-shift, and she'd crouch in a utility closet, breathing in bleach and fluorescent light, waiting for it to pass. Sometimes she cried, not from pain, but from sheer exhaustion, and from a loneliness that no phone call or prayer could touch. Labor came suddenly, late one night while Lorraine was working, and Alicia lay in bed, too tired to dream. The EMTs showed up fast, their questions clipped, their glances cool. One of them looked at her like he already knew the story. Young, black, pregnant. He didn't say anything, but he didn't need to. The hospital staff weren't cruel. They were just clinical, like she was a case file, a statistic. No one asked about her support system or what brought her here. They measured her, monitored her, managed her. That was it. She gave birth at sunrise, a baby girl. She named her Naomi after a grandmother she barely remembered, but who her mother spoke of with a kind of quiet reverence. Naomi was tiny but fierce, with strong little fingers and a voice that could fill a room. When they laid her on Alicia's chest, she didn't cry. She was too drained. Instead, she held her daughter like she was holding on to the only thing that still belonged to her. The first few months were a war of attrition, diapers, aching joints, sleepless nights, and the constant anxiety of falling short. Lorraine did what she could, but she was running on fumes herself. Alicia took shifts when she could, leaving Naomi with the woman next door and coming home with her heart pounding. What if something went wrong? What if she didn't check? What if... And still, the stares on the sidewalk continued. Even people with kids from 3 different fathers looked down their noses. Not because they were better, but because they could. Because Alicia reminded them of the parts of themselves they wanted to forget. In this town, she had become a warning label. No one remembered she'd once been that smart girl from St. Albans. No one spoke about the competitions she won, or the nights she'd spent buried in library books, or the medals she'd earned. All of that had vanished, rewritten. All that remained was the pregnancy, the fall, but she didn't break. She got up, fed her daughter, worked her shift, did the laundry, bought formula, bathed Naomi. Then when the house went still and the clock ticked into silence, she sat at the kitchen table in the dark, thinking. Not dreaming, just thinking. About what came next. About clawing her way back to solid ground. About taking back the right to speak. One night, after a double shift, she passed by the bulletin board outside the corner grocery store and spotted a flyer. Night classes, adult education program, applications open until the end of the month. She stared at it for a long moment, heart suddenly loud in her ears. Then she pulled it down, folded it neatly, and tucked it into her pocket. That night she couldn't sleep, not from fear, but from the unfamiliar buzz of hope, the tiniest flicker, but real. The city hadn't changed. It still looked away when she passed. But now Alicia had a plan. Slow, quiet, heavy, but real. Not revenge, not rebellion. A return, with receipts. It had only been a few weeks since Naomi's birth, but the isolation already felt baked into Alicia's life. The house they shared with Lorraine now felt smaller, tighter, as if the walls leaned in with every sleepless night. Their neighborhood, tucked into Savannah's southwest side, was the kind of place where the pavement cracked years ago and never got fixed, where grass grew wild at the curbs, where most dreams rusted out before they ever left the block. Their home was a single-story shell with peeling paint and old blinds that never quite closed. There was no peace here, no privacy, just a routine that wrapped around them like a too-tight coat. Morning started with Lorraine's tired shuffle out the door, the cough of their ancient Ford engine, and the faint scent of dollar store deodorant. Then it was Alicia's turn. Naomi's cries, bottles, diapers, spit up. The afternoons bled into evenings, then the cleaning shift, then the textbooks. Life moved in circles, and no one clapped. No one asked how she was doing. People didn't even recognize her anymore. The same neighbors who once bragged about that brilliant girl at St. Alden's now barely looked up when she passed. She had become invisible. Deciding to go back to school wasn't some bold act of courage. It was survival. Alicia knew if she gave in now, she'd become exactly who they already decided she was. But if she fought, maybe, just maybe, she could become who she knew she was meant to be. The adult education program met in a dusty back room of the local public high school. The desks were scratched. The air smelled like old paper and mildew. Most students were older, exhausted moms, burned-out men with calloused hands, and people just trying to finish what life had interrupted. Few of them actually studied. Most just showed up. But Alicia came ready, binder, pens, questions. She sat up front, stayed late, asked things no one else bothered to ask. Not every teacher noticed. Most were too worn out to care, but one did. Mr. Garrett. Mid-40s, wore the same tie every Tuesday. One night as she packed up her books, he glanced at her and said quietly, "You've got something. Don't let go of it." Once Naomi started sleeping a little longer through the night, Alicia found herself returning to a different kind of sanctuary, the city library. From the outside, it was nothing special. A boxy slab of gray concrete from the 1970s with a flickering sign and parking lot full of potholes. But inside, warm yellow lamps buzzed overhead, chairs creaked like old knees, and the shelves smelled like forgotten summers. More importantly, it was quiet, and in that silence, Alicia studied. She scribbled quotes into notebooks, compared statistics, wrestled with algebra, sociology, literature. She photocopied pages from outdated textbooks. She wasn't learning for personal growth or to impress anyone. She was learning to survive, to escape, not out of spite, not for applause, for Naomi. She wanted to understand the system, why everything seemed stacked against people like her. She wasn't looking for answers so much as explanations. In hindsight, those late nights among the dust and dog-eared pages were the first seeds of her future dissertation, still unformed but already taking root. During the day, she scrubbed blood off tile floors at the local hospital, emptied bins of biohazard waste, wiped down sinks. Patients looked past her. Doctors and nurses, especially the young interns, looked through her like she was part of the building. One exception, Gloria. An older nurse with laugh lines and steel in her spine, Gloria would sometimes pause at the end of her shift, leaning against the break room door while Alicia cleaned. "I'll tell you something," she said one night, without drama or pity. "The world doesn't owe you its ears, but that don't mean you stop talking." A simple sentence, passed like a message in a bottle, from one survivor to another. Meanwhile, Alicia's former classmates from St. Alden's were all over the local paper's alumni section. Yale, Columbia, Samford. Their smiling faces posed in graduation gowns, teeth white, futures brighter. Madeline, of course, made the front page. Best commencement speech at Duke University. Arms wrapped around a grinning dean. Alicia didn't feel rage, just a quiet, painful ache, a flash of envy, and something else, like watching people live in a parallel timeline where she'd been edited out of the script. Once she ran into an old classmate at the grocery store. Alicia smiled, cautiously hopeful. The girl recognized her, gave a tight, panicked grin, paid for her oat milk and kale, and left in a hurry, leaving behind the scent of designer perfume and silence. Alicia stood there at the checkout line with 2 cartons of milk and a box of oatmeal, and for the first time in months, she felt the sting of tears press up hard behind her eyes. But she didn't let them fall. Getting into college was no guarantee. She had no advisors, no family with connections, no one to walk her through how to write a recommendation request or complete a FAFSA form. So she Googled. She asked librarians. She wrote drafts on the kitchen table at midnight, under a dim light, Naomi asleep in the next room. Her personal statement didn't paint her as a hero. It didn't ask for pity. It just told the truth, fact by fact, moment by moment. Her only hope was that someone on the other end of that envelope would see she wasn't just a statistic. The letter came on a Thursday, envelope stamped with the seal of Savannah Community College. Her heart pounded, but her hands were steady. She opened it alone, sitting on the back steps where the laundry fluttered on a plastic line. Admitted. Entry-level courses, conditional, pending academic performance. But she was in, and for the first time in a long while, she smiled. A real one. That night, she walked into Naomi's room, scooped her daughter up from the mattress on the floor, and whispered into her hair, "We start over, baby girl." I promise Alicia Monroe didn't want to return to the world that had spit her out. But that didn't mean she'd forgotten it. She just chose to keep walking, with her past behind her and her purpose in front of her. By 2002, Alicia was 22, still living in the house she grew up in. Same peeling paint, same sagging porch, same rusted mailbox. Their neighborhood on the edge of Savannah's industrial zone smelled like cornmeal and diesel in the mornings. The neighbors still spoke about her in low tones. The one who got kicked out of St. Alden's no amount of years had softened the judgment. But inside those walls, her world was different. Naomi, now a toddler, slept curled up on a hand-me-down mattress with a stuffed rabbit missing one ear. Alicia rose before dawn, made breakfast, relieved her mother from baby duty, then caught the city bus to class. She'd graduated from community college already. Now she was enrolled in graduate school. Yes, graduate school. Despite red tape, despite debt, despite the cold stares from the admissions committee and the skeptical comments like, "Are you sure you can handle this with a child?" She wasn't sure, but she showed up anyway. The campus at South Georgia University wasn't glamorous. A concrete box surrounded by flower beds no one tended. Inside, the smell of instant coffee, wet backpacks, and microwave noodles. This wasn't St. Alden's. No pearl earrings, no tailored blazers, just sweat, survival, and a whole lot of tired ambition. And yet, even here, she stood out. Not as a peer, but as a symbol, the outlier. In seminars, she sat in the front row, spoke up, wrote boldly. Still, she could feel the subtle resistance. Her sociology professor, Dr. Gant, a white man in his 50s, offered faint praise but never invited her to the academic conferences the other grad students were asked to attend. "I'm not sure this topic would interest the committee," he told her once, flipping through her thesis proposal. The silent system, racial pressure in Southern academic institutions. It wasn't a no, it was a warning. Don't make waves, especially not if you look like her. But Alicia wrote anyway. At night, after scrubbing floors at the university hospital, hunched in janitor closets between mops and bleach, she read policy papers on school vouchers, studied case files on racial bias in education. She interviewed others who'd been pushed out of elite spaces like she had, students whose stories echoed hers, teen pregnancy, poverty, invisibility. Most of them never came back, but Alicia did. And she wasn't just coming back. She was bringing data. Each evening after her shift and before Naomi's bedtime, she returned to the city library. It was the only place that held the kind of silence she craved. Not the judgmental hush of church pews or PTA meetings, but the deep, working silence of people building something out of nothing. There behind a stack of sociology journals, Miss Edwards, the head librarian, always left Alicia a pile of printed articles, and some nights a sandwich and a chipped mug of cocoa. And it was there, at a wobbly wooden table near the back, that Alicia finished the first chapter of her thesis. She wrote the opening sentence slowly, deliberately. "I wasn't expelled because I got pregnant. I was expelled because I reminded them their system could break." On the day of her dissertation defense, Alicia Monroe walked into the room wearing a worn-out burgundy suit, simple earrings, and a touch of makeup, just enough to say, "I'm here, and I'm serious." Three professors sat waiting. Older, white, two of them unmistakably old school. One, Dr. Hatch, gave a faint smirk when he heard the title of her work. But 15 minutes in, he stopped interrupting. Alicia didn't give a speech. She gave a testimony, clear, grounded, unembellished, facts, numbers, names. No dramatic pleas, no fiery rhetoric, just the truth, spoken plainly and with precision. She wasn't asking to be heard. She was making sure they couldn't ignore her. There was no applause at the end, but the committee rose, nodded, and conferred the title. Doctor of Philosophy, not for the prestige, for the power that came with it. A voice sharpened by research, made undeniable by effort. That same day she received a letter, cream-colored envelope, gold-embossed seal from St. Alden's Academy. The handwriting, neat, formal, familiar. Dear Dr. Monroe, on behalf of the administration of St. Alden's Academy, it is our honor to invite you as our keynote speaker at the 2005 commencement ceremony. Signed, Mrs. Winthrop. She read it twice. No shaking, no laughter, no anger. She took a sip of gas station coffee, glanced at Naomi drawing a crooked little house in pencil on the floor, and said calmly, "We're going back." She wasn't the 17-year-old girl who once stood outside the principal's office holding a cardboard box of textbooks and a science fair ribbon. She had passed through every stage: shame, fury, fear, numbness, defiance, and landed on focus. She hadn't forgiven, but she had stopped living for revenge. Naomi was 8 now. She could read. She knew who Rosa Parks was. She knew her mom worked late every night. Sometimes she asked, "Mom, why do you always write about school?" Alicia never explained, because one day when it mattered most, Naomi would understand on her own. 8 years had passed. It was another humid Georgia morning, the kind where the sun presses down like a second skin, and the air is full of stories people don't say out loud. Alicia Monroe was driving back to St. Alden's Academy, the private school that expelled her when she was just 17. The car was a rental, gray sedan, sputtering AC, faint smell of old plastic. Naomi sat in the back seat in a pretty dress, oblivious to why her mom kept checking the mirrors every 10 seconds. Alicia hadn't told her what kind of place this was. Just that today, Mom was giving a talk to some big kids finishing school. Naomi counted trees. Alicia studied her own eyes in the rearview mirror. She was 25 now, braids neatly tied back, makeup subtle and strategic. Highlight, not distract. Wire-rimmed glasses, navy suit with worn elbows, not from poverty, but from wear. Her face had lost its softness. Her muscles were still. But inside, she was a tight wire. The moment she turned onto the familiar driveway of St. Alden's, her heart kicked up a beat. The place hadn't changed. Manicured lawn, whitewashed walls, tall windows with shadowed curtains. The kind of pristine that says, "We control what's seen and what's hidden." A young staffer waved her through. New face didn't recognize her and directed her to park. Alicia stepped out, adjusted her blazer. Naomi asked to stay in the car with a book. Alicia said okay, promised she wouldn't be long. The second she opened the main door, the smell hit her. Wax, starch, and the faint perfume of money. The green carpet, the founder portraits, the stained glass crest, all untouched. The past didn't just whisper, it reached out and grabbed her, daring her to flinch. Rebecca Lang was the first to greet her, same assistant from years ago, who had once looked away when Alicia left with her box of belongings. Now she smiled, tight, professional. "Dr. Monroe, so good to see you." No apology, no mention of history. Alicia nodded, silent. Rebecca led her down the hallway, just like that day 8 years ago. The donor plaques had changed, but the walls hadn't. Same portraits, same hushed tones behind doors. The teacher's lounge had been turned into a pseudo coffeehouse. Inside, a small crowd of faculty and speakers mingled. Among them, Mrs. Winthrop, the same woman, only grayer, slightly stooped. But her eyes still had that frosty sharpness. She approached, offered her hand. "Dr. Monroe, we appreciate you making time for us." She didn't need to say who Alicia once was. She remembered. Alicia could see it in her eyes, how that memory stung. But no apology, just chilly courtesy. As the room filled with half-hearted small talk and fake laughter over educational policy, Alicia scanned the faces. Some recognized her. You could tell by the flicker, too long a glance, a twitch of discomfort, especially Madeline Green. Once the school's golden girl, now the mother of a graduating senior. Her gaze paused on Alicia a second too long, then shifted away. When the call came for guests to move to the auditorium, they filed into the same hall Alicia once walked as a pariah. Nothing had changed. Polished wood, stage draped in flags, yellow chairs in careful rows. She sat backstage, her heart steady, but the echoes in her mind were loud. Whispers, laughter, judgment, the cold finality of being made an example. She hadn't just been expelled as a student. She had been erased as a message. This is what we won't allow here. No trembling. She waited. When the time came, Mrs. Ellis, the same literature teacher, took the mic. Today's guest is a graduate who proves that strength doesn't come from perfection, but from perseverance and grit. Please welcome Dr. Alicia Monroe. Soft applause. Alicia stepped out. Faces looked back at her. Polished, mostly white, mostly mothers, teachers, parents, a few kids. Some curious, some unsure, some pretending not to care. All of them watching. And this time, she was the one at the mic. She stood before them, voice steady, not loud, not angry, just clear as the truth. 8 years ago, I stood here too, not on this stage, by the exit. And they told me, you don't belong. Not because of my grades, not because I broke the rules, but because of who I was, a young, pregnant black girl. The auditorium was silent, not a whisper, not a rustle. She spoke of mopping hospital floors at night, the same hospital where she had given birth hours before, of studying from secondhand textbooks, of being looked at sideways in stores, in waiting rooms, even in church, and how she came to understand it wasn't personal, it was structural. I'm not here for applause, I'm not here for revenge. I came to say, what you tried to erase didn't disappear. It grew, it got stronger, smarter, and it found its voice. Someone in the back started clapping, then another, then another. The applause spread, soft at first but sure. Even Madeline clapped, hesitant, eyes averted. Mrs. Winthrop didn't clap, but she gave a nod, brief, stiff, like she knew. Facts are facts. Backstage, Naomi was waiting. She'd snuck in from the car, sat through the whole speech without a sound. Now she looked at her mother like she was made of light. Alicia hugged her and finally let herself breathe. The graduation hall at St. Alden's Academy still gleamed with polished pride. White walls, perfect trim, the same pristine image as the day they told her to leave, with her box of books and her future dangling. But this time, she wasn't a scared teenager begging for a second chance. She was a woman who had earned every step of her return. Alicia Monroe didn't come back for validation. She came back to speak with no shame, no fear, and no need to look away. The room was full. Parents, teachers, graduates. In the front row sat the faculty, still mostly white. At the center, Mrs. Winthrop. Same cream suit, same silver brooch, but her posture a little softened, her face a little less certain. Alicia caught that. From her first step on stage, their eyes met. No nod, no gesture, just memory, sharp, mutual. Alicia wore a black blazer, clean and simple, her hair pulled into a firm braid. She stood alone at the mic, a few seconds stretched like years. She didn't begin with hello. She began with a statement. I was taught that strength meant silence, that patience was a kind of dignity. But I've learned strength is action and voice, especially in the places where silence is expected. Tension hung in the air. A few mothers in prim hats stiffened. Someone pretended to take notes. But most eyes were fixed on her. Alicia didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Every word landed like truth too long avoided. She told them about being the only scholarship kid among daughters of judges and politicians, how her achievements were praised, but her presence was merely tolerated, how pregnancy became the excuse to push her out, not because of rules, but because she no longer fit their image, how no one spoke up, not the teachers, not the friends, not even Mrs. Winthrop, who hid behind the school's honor. When they expelled me, no one called it discrimination. They said morality. They said reputation. But the truth was simpler. I didn't fit. Not by skin, not by class, and especially not by compliance. No apologies, no regrets. Just facts. Bare, inconvenient, undeniable. The room didn't flinch. It froze. Naomi was on the second row in her white dress, holding the program that read, Dr. Alicia Monroe, keynote speaker. She sat up straight, unmoving. Her fingers gently creased the edge of the page. Alicia spoke of working as a hospital janitor, of studying at night while rocking a baby, of being passed over for receptionist jobs because single moms aren't stable, and how that rejection became her fuel, not to prove them wrong, but to build something new. I didn't come back for forgiveness. I'm not here for your praise. I came to give voice to the ones left behind, the ones you forgot or pushed out. Not a sound, just 100 shallow breaths. In the third row, Madeline, her former classmate, now mother to one of the graduates, sat stiff, her hair more severe, her face less smug. When their eyes met, Madeline looked away. Alicia scanned the crowd, calm, grounded. I hold a doctorate in social science. My dissertation? On exclusion. Not just from lists, from futures, and how even those told to leave can return, not for revenge, but to exist, to prove the system didn't win. Stillness, then a clap, then another, a ripple. One by one, the applause rose. Some graduates, then parents, a teacher. The whole room finally, not thunderous but steady. Mrs. Winthrop didn't stand, didn't clap, but she watched. And Alicia didn't need her hands. She had her silence. When the ceremony ended, Alicia stepped off the stage. Slow, unrushed. In the hallway, yes, that hallway, where they once told her to clear out her locker, she passed a few staff. One nodded, one avoided her. A young teacher she didn't know said, "Thank you. We needed that." Alicia just nodded. Naomi waited by the car, arms wide. "You were like a superhero, Mom," she said. And that was the only approval Alicia ever needed. They left without looking back. Behind them, the same white walls stood, unchanged. But something inside had shifted. Not a revolution, not an apology, just a crack in the silence that had lasted too long. If you're still here, still listening, then maybe something in this story hit home. Maybe you've been told you don't belong, that you're too much or not enough. Maybe you faced a wall someone built long before you were born. But this story isn't about defeat. It's not about revenge. It's about coming back through the front door, about knowing your worth isn't in names or diplomas or anyone's permission. It's in the simple fact that you got back up, that you kept walking, even with weight, even alone. Alicia didn't want apologies. She didn't need to shame anyone. She came back to say, you don't have to be perfect to be worthy. Your pain is not shame. Your past is not a sentence. Your resilience, that's power. Quiet, but unstoppable. And if you've ever felt like the outsider, if they've told you, you're not one of us, remember, you are exactly the person who can shift the story, Not with noise, not all at once, but simply by refusing to disappear. You matter. You're needed. And you are not alone. If this story spoke to you, there are more. Real stories, strong voices, the ones rarely told. Follow the channel. There's more coming. Sometimes one story is all it takes to remember who you are